The NCAA won the top of the first inning in its court case with Tennessee, but plenty more ball game left to be played in Tennessee's lawsuit against college sports governing body. Welcome into the Volunteers State. I'm Blake Toppmeyer alongside the Knoxville News Sentinel's Adam Sparks and John Adams. Plenty to get into today, including an update in Tennessee's lawsuit against the NCAA, while the NCAA investigates Tennessee for possible violations of its NIL guidelines. And Adam has an update for us from Tennessee's Attorney General as well. So let's set the stage here. Earlier this week, the court issued a ruling in Tennessee's quest for a temporary restraining order. Tennessee did not get that. Judge Clifton Corker denied that request for a temporary restraining order in this case against the NCAA. However, the more important preliminary injunction awaits. And Clifton Corker, the judge in this case, may have tipped his hand in which way he's leaning in his writings about the temporary restraining order. He said, quote, "Considering the evidence currently before the court, the plaintiffs are likely to succeed on the merits of their claim under the Sherman Antitrust Act." That sentence would seem like good news for Tennessee, and it would seem like alarm bells for the NCAA. Adam, you had a story about this very topic in the Knoxville News Sentinel this week, so you take it from there. And what's sort of the mood around Tennessee after, as I put it, they lost the top of the first, they're behind, but they still got the meat of their order coming up, did they not?
Yeah, so you chose the baseball analogy. I'll stick with the football analogy since this is probably what this is going to come down to. NCAA made a field goal on their opening drive. They're up 3-0, but their defense sucks. So the opposing team is coming back out on the I guess double meeting their defense sucks. I guess I could use that. By the way, Clifton Corker, what a phenomenal name for a judge, right?
Absolutely. Central like, Casting Office ordered that one up.
Yeah, I had to double check to make sure that wasn't the guy like My Cousin Vinny, because it seems like that's that'd have been the name of that guy. So the mood that I got from the sides that I interacted with was, okay, we get it. It's maybe a small setback, if any setback, but things look good. And that's mostly from Tennessee, and I think the AG side of reading through the opinion. You put it, NCAA at least fended off what could have happened. Its NIL rules for now are in place for a few more days. Now, so what does that mean for the injunction? The injunction, could freeze NIL rules under the NCAA for months, for years. I talked to the Attorney General right before we came on here, and he indicated it could be months. He said it's in terms of appeals, could be years. That's years plural. So something's probably going to happen in NCAA governance before this is settled, unless the injunction is granted. I've seen different opinions on this. I've heard from people that know far more about the law than any of us three that, hey, read that opinion like Blake you just read, and that says that the injunction is probably going to be granted. The language sounds that way. On the other hand, I've heard also that if you turn down a TRO, if you deny a temporary restraining order, it makes it a little more likely that you'll deny the injunction. So I don't know if we're looking at a 50-50 here, but the side of the state of Tennessee and the University of Tennessee very much enjoyed reading the opinion of Judge Corker, because I think the signals there were, hey, you guys are on the right side of this, but the timing of when you're going to get the judgment that you want is really in question. Is it going to be the injunction on Tuesday, or is it going to be something a little more long-term in the lawsuit? I'm getting set to go to the hearing on Tuesday. My understanding from the Attorney General's office is this could be like 20 minutes. It could be like 1 to 3 hours. So
pack a lunch.
Yeah, that's right. I thought maybe it'd be more of the 20 minutes, not the 3 hours. But my understanding it'd be a whole lot of boring legalese. So if you're planning on making the trip, there's been sort of like a wink, wink. Hey, we're going to go tailgate messages out there, out on Vol Twitter. People going and tailgating and going to the hearing and checker the courtroom, checker Greenville, all those sort of things. I would dissuade people. I would say people probably shouldn't do that. But if you do go, I would say it's not going to help your case, UT's case. If you do go, it'll look chaotic, which is what the NCAA says is going to happen if these rules are stricken. That it's going to be chaos. A guy with like a UT hat with a beer can on the side of it and a straw is probably not going to help the case. But you're free to go if you want to go. But this is not going to be like OJ being called to the stand. It's going to be pretty boring. At least,
yeah. Of all the bad ideas we hear from Vol Twitter, which tend to happen from time to time, this would be among them. It sounds like.
But yeah. I've had people email me and said, "Hey, I've already asked off for work that day." I'm like, "Why? Why are you if you'll just like stay on knoxnews.com, like just get the app and like we'll tell you when it happens and what happens, and then after that we'll translate a whole lot of legal jargon that we don't understand at the time, but we'll translate well enough when we do to you. You don't have to sit in the courtroom."
John, you're going to be doing some tailgating at that hearing next week, and how do you read the score line here as we head toward the bottom of the first, or as Adam would put it, as the ball is now kicked into Tennessee's hands for its next drive?
Well, I've done what you're not supposed to do in adjudication. I've already believed where this ends up, it's going to be in Tennessee's favor. So all this preliminary stuff and leading up to that doesn't really matter. The NCAA won't win in court. When I was thinking about that, when Adam was bringing up people going to that, I was thinking people I know that might be good representatives for that occasion.
Did you come up with anybody?
Yeah, I won't divulge their names. But yeah, I did. And I think they could, let's see, how should I say this? Make an impression, I think, regionally and nationally. So I might comment to them, what are your plans? I would, at reading Adam's work, and he's done a great job of this because this is also complex. When you get into court cases, and I know, Blake, you have a legal background. You're well educated in the law. And
yes, I have a minor in criminal justice, John. Got straight A's in those classes, so I'm basically a lawyer. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're a lot smarter than some of the lawyers I do know. So I feel confident in your opinion. But Adam has been able to make a complex, sometimes boring issue very readable, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. That's hard to do. And in reading the Adam stories, though, I think about this reflects the change in Tennessee football over the last 20 years. Because I can remember when the football beat reporter for Tennessee for our paper, he was sort of a / police beat reporter too. He'd need to be able to report on crime quite frequently. And now I think Adam is more of a court reporter. So I think this requires more education and perhaps a little more skill.
And what it says is, John, the Vols are back, right? The fact that we've come full circle now, and you need to have two hats to be covering this.
Well, you could say they're out of the jail. They're out of the local jail and trying to stay out of the NCAA jail.
Mm-hmm. Might have better success with the latter than the former.
I mean, this is my second hearing in 10 months on this beat. One was an NCAA hearing, and now we're going to have an actual hearing. I don't know what's above. This is a federal court hearing, so I guess Supreme Court would be the only thing left for Tennessee football to go to, I suppose.
Stay tuned. Adam, you mentioned, okay, the TRO, the temporary restraining order, that's in the rearview mirror. That went in the NCAA's favor, as we've discussed. That's good for the NCAA, but not the biggest deal in the world for Tennessee. Now on tap next week is this injunction. Sort of give us a preview for what that means in case instance A, Tennessee wins the injunction. Instance B, Tennessee fails in getting the injunction. And in particular, I'm hoping you can kind of lay out a picture of if Tennessee wins this injunction. I think, the average fan might think that means, the NCAA enforcement staff is tied up in zip ties and hauled off, or that Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, has to report to Rikers Island. That's not what happens, right? And the NCAA investigation, in some level, could maybe continue even if Tennessee wins this injunction, because these are directly related. Well, they're related to some degree, right? But correct me if I'm wrong, but even if Tennessee wins the injunction, that doesn't 100% have to end the investigation, does it?
Yeah, so the difference in sort of the burden right now is that the temporary restraining order was shot down because that's an emergency attempt, saying that, hey, you've got to fix this like this second right now, or there's going to be terrible harm done to people. And the judgment was, yeah, some kids are signing on signing day, but they could recoup their money, and it's at this point it's only monetary. They could recoup their money like a week from now if the injunction was granted. So it just didn't raise to the level of an emergency. The injunction, if it's granted, I think the burden is a little lower there. But if the injunction is granted, that means all NIL recruiting rules, the recruiting ban, so to speak, on NIL would be frozen. So that would mean, like under NCAA rules right now, you can't go and negotiate with a collective that is affiliated with the school directly. Like you cannot go in as a high school player that's a recruit and talk, just hard numbers. And you can't tie that to your enrollment. You have to wait till you're enrolled. So you can, wink, wink, and nod, and I guess slide a sheet of paper across the table of how much you need. And a lot of that goes on now. We're naive if we think that doesn't go on. The NCAA is naive to think that doesn't go on. But technically, you can't know how much you're going to get paid until you enroll at the school. That way it's not tied to enrollment, which is, if the injunction is granted, those sort of things go away. You're going to have people being openly negotiating prices for NIL deals. If that is frozen, meaning if the injunction is granted, then they'll move forward without college football will move forward, or college athletics will move forward without those NIL rules. For Tennessee and the investigation it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because, what they're being investigated for is for allegedly breaking NIL rules in the past. If a federal judge says those rules are illegal in the present, they can technically, in their own governance, they can still go back and investigate if those rules were broken in the past when they claim rules. Now, from an optics standpoint, and I asked the Attorney General about this, just his take on it. It's not like he has any purview over what the NCAA does, but his take was similar to mine, which is, yeah, they could still do it, but it would be really hard sell. If you're trying to enforce rules that are no longer lawful and enforce them of what was broken in the past, you're sort of setting yourself up for a lawsuit. And so what does the NCAA want to do there? If this injunction is granted, those rules are not lawful anymore. They're illegal. And then the NCAA tries to punish Tennessee for breaking those now illegal rules in the past. They're setting themselves up to go back to court. And of course, Tennessee would be happy to meet them there or invite them to the court. And I don't know what the NCAA would have to gain from that, because there'd be no benefit for the NCAA if they did that. Like there's not a, if you were to uphold those penalties to Tennessee, like there wouldn't be like a prize at the end. it would just end because you couldn't go beyond the injunction to enforce any of the rules. It's just it wouldn't make sense for the NCAA to continue to pursue it. I would imagine either if the injunction was granted and NIL rules were frozen, my just best guess would be that they would either stop the investigation, pause the investigation, or more likely maybe just find a couple of secondary violations, something minor, and then move forward in that way. But who knows if Tennessee, felt emboldened if they were to win this injunction, they may say, no, we're not going to accept anything.
They might bust out the zip ties.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, one of these sides is going to feel emboldened by what happens, both in the injunction, whether it's granted or denied, by the language that comes out of it. Again, whether or not the judge is going to, tip his hand of which way he's going to rule ultimately. One of the two sides is going to be emboldened by that, either to, in the NCAA side, press forward and say, these rules are still on the books and we're going to enforce them and we're going to punish you. Either the NCAA is going to do that, or Tennessee is going to be emboldened if the injunction is granted, and say, I dare you to give us a notice of allegation that says we broke rules in the past that are now illegal. I dare you to do that. And it's going to be fun to see which way this goes. Because again, these are two separate things. It's a federal lawsuit and it's an NCAA investigation, but they are tied together and at least loosely. One impacts the other one.
John, if this injunction is granted, as Adam was describing there, that freezes whatever meager NIL rules that the NCAA has had for the last few years. And how I have put it, that freezing would turn the wild, wild west, as we've heard it called for years now, into the wilder, wilder west, where there is no rules. It's like, there were before 2 rules, there would be 0 rules. Now, I maintain I'm fine with that. I personally don't have a problem with that. The wilder, wilder west with no rules, I think also translates to free market capitalism. However, I think there would be a lot of people who would bristle over an NIL space where there were no guardrails, there was no rule against recruiting inducements, there was no rule against pay for play, which are the rules that we're talking about being frozen if this injunction is granted. How do you see this? Would you take alarm in the wild, wild west becoming wilder and wilder? Or do you think that's an overall win, not just for Tennessee, but for college sports, athletes, everybody involved?
I say saddle up and ride hard. I mean, bring on the Wild West. I don't care at this point. You can't go back to the way it was, to the good old days when you paid athletes under the table. Those days are gone. So
the good old days, that money coming under the table. I love that. That is the good old days.
Yeah. So I just know how this is going to end. So let's just go ahead and get near the ending, because that's going to be the final resolution. I think it's important to note that Tennessee is hardly the only school operating this way in the NIL era. And if the NCAA was hoping that by rattling UT's cage, it would be a deterrent, I think it's failing miserably, because I just read where Georgia quarterback Carson Beck has purchased a Lamborghini. It seems like, some Georgia official who might be concerned about their NIL image as it pertains to the NCAA might have said, hey, Carson, could you hold off a couple of months on that Lamborghini deal? But no, he's out there with his Lamborghini. So I just think all these programs, I don't think programs are afraid of the big bad NCAA anymore.
John, I have not looked at my phone yet or at Twitter to see the Carson Beck Lamborghini yet today. As we record this, I will as soon as we're done. But I've heard about this from 2 people today, the Carson Beck Lamborghini. So I know it actually happened. Our good friend Tony Basilio mentioned it on the air today, and the Attorney General of Tennessee mentioned it to me on the phone. just a minute ago.
Yes, but that's an endorsement, not an inducement, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So,
Adam, what else did you hear from the AG? I know you know the coverage over at knoxnews.com for people who kind of want to read the full details of that conversation. That conversation, to be clear, occurred after Tennessee was not granted the temporary restraining order. Somewhat, sort of, I guess, a preview maybe of what the AG expects to come in this quest for a temporary injunction. So, what else relevant can you tell us came out of that conversation with Tennessee's AG?
Yeah, Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti. He didn't tip his hand of where he thinks this is going to go in terms of the injunction. And maybe he's hedging his bets there a little bit. He's confident in the stand that they've made. He very much liked a lot of the language that was in the opinion from the judge after the temporary restraining order was denied. He thinks they're ultimately going to win this. I feel like I can say that. Now, whether that's an injunction or the case long term, we'll see. He was very open about sort of his motivation in this. Now, he's been at this for a while, so any UT fans that think that this was sort of an overnight thing, that was not the case. If you look back in the transfer case against NCAA, that was back in December, I think. There were 7 states in on that one. I think Ohio is the one that led the way, but Skrmetti was the Tennessee AG was on that one. Tennessee was one of the 7 states that was challenging the transfer rule for the NCAA, and they won that against the NCAA. He's been on this for quite a while about hammering the NCAA, and he is perfectly happy with sort of having the reputation of taking on the NCAA on behalf of all Tennessee athletes and universities. But he was upfront about that. Certainly includes UT. I asked him about the timing of it. Of the lawsuit being filed right after it had come to light that Tennessee was under an NCAA investigation. He did not shy away from that. He said, yes, absolutely. That's when I saw that, it was time to go. And I went, and they filed the suit right after that. And he floated even the idea that, sometimes that we banter about, or sports talk banters about, media, fans, whatever. He floated the idea that maybe this was a quote unquote payback situation for the Tennessee getting the best of the NCAA in some respects in the last investigation into Jeremy Pruitt. If you remember right, that's where Tennessee fans first knew the name Jonathan Skrmetti, because going into the hearing that was back in April in the Jeremy Pruitt case, Tennessee was being threatened with a potential postseason ban, and Skrmetti, as the AG, wrote a threatening letter, really, to the NCAA, where he essentially threatened litigation if Tennessee got a postseason ban. And the way he framed that was in the NIL space, that if Tennessee got a postseason ban, that would be robbing athletes of their opportunity to make money in NIL. In other words, your endorsements could be harmed. You're not playing, so therefore people aren't seeing you. A bowl game is a big stage, and so you should be allowed to play that, especially if the violations were, if the violations were committed by previous coaches and athletes. We don't want to get back into that case, but Skrmetti had a pretty threatening letter in there, and he said he enjoyed that. He relished the fact that he had some part in helping UT in that case, and he wanted to have a part in this one. And
yeah, the interesting thing, I think, Adam, and I'm putting on my armchair lawyer hat, is like I actually think Tennessee's case, or Skrmetti's case in this instance, is probably much stronger than what it would have been, had that last situation come to a head, because the warnings from Brett Kavanaugh as it pertains to the Sherman Antitrust Act were very clear 3 years ago. And these violations, unlike the Pruitt situation, these violations would have occurred, if they did occur, after that Supreme Court ruling from Kavanaugh. So I realize I'm side seat driving here, but Skrmetti may have had a case back at that time. We'll never know because it didn't come to that. But the way I see it, I feel like his case is probably even stronger now with all that has happened. In the last
Yeah, I
few
mean,
years.
every time the NCAA has been in court and they've been arguing against athletes getting absolutely every penny that they can get, the NCAA has lost. All these have come down to Sherman Antitrust Act. That if you infringe on the rights of athletes to make money, you're going to lose. And so I think that's where this one is headed. Again, I don't know if the verdict or judgment, I should say, that Tennessee and the UT and all those want, if that'll come sooner or later. I think that's the bigger question. But we kind of know where this is going. And here's the thing, you talked about the wilder west or whatever a minute ago. Tennessee fans, for whatever it is that you want the next stage to be, whether it's players there's no NIL rules. There's no rules at all. The NCAA goes away. The SEC breaks away in a super conference. That the players are employees. Whatever it is you think you want in the next stage, you're probably not going to like a big part of it when it comes. And that's not your fault, by the way, fans, because we don't know how this is going to go. I feel like everything that comes next is like the best of a lot of bad options. But that's where we are. I talked with the AG a minute ago, and I think the way he put it was, years and years ago, college sports almost seemed like intramurals in the respect that it was just there didn't seem like on the surface that there was as much money involved, and it seemed more quaint and traditional and all these things. We know that it wasn't, but it seemed that way. And he made the point that there's an endless amount of money now. So whether you want college sports to change or not, if you want it to be equitable, to be fair to athletes, it's going to have to change in some sense, because there's just so much money. And if athletes are being hindered from getting their share of money, then you're going to have a problem in the courts.
John, I want to close with this. We're seeing a very unified response from Tennessee, very strong, bold, open response, not just from the university, but as we're talking about here, by state politicians, all the way up to now we've seen U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn get involved. It was a much different scene several years ago when Tennessee attempted to hire Greg Schiano as its football coach, and it was met with backlash not only by Tennessee fans, but many state politicians were against that as well. And of course, we all know what came next. I've been asked, and I want to ask you, I've been asked whether I'm surprised at this unified response from Tennessee, extending from the university on up to state and federal government officials. And I've said that I am not. Knowing the politics of the university right now, knowing the players, knowing the politics of the state, I am not surprised that there has been a uniform response. I think that not only is it possibly a winning case here, as we will see, but I think it's also winning politics right now for elected officials to throw their support behind the Vols, behind Donde Plowman, and others at the university. Your thoughts on this? You've covered the state for a long time. You know some of the key players here. Would you have expected this? Does this surprise you, the unity that we're seeing, not only from the university officials, but on up to very important members of the state government and beyond?
No, I'm not at all surprised, Blake. I mean, I've been here since 1987, and Tennessee has never had this quality of leadership administratively, not just in sports, but at the top of the university, with Randy Boyd over the entire university system, with Donde Plowman, who's kind of set the tone for all this as UT chancellor, and with Danny White as AD. I think they're all very good in business and very good in politics. You have to wear a lot of hats in those roles, and they wear them all very well. And so they inspire confidence. If you listen to Donde Plowman, one of my emailers compared her to an evangelist and said he would.
Was that a compliment or a criticism?
No, it was a compliment.
Okay.
We're in East Tennessee. So that was a compliment. So, yeah, I think so. What happens, it's not like you've got a bunch of buffoons in charge here, and that's been the case before. So, people, yeah, high ranking officials, governmental officials, a governor, an attorney general, whoever would say, yeah, I want to play on that team. I want to be on that side. I believe what they're selling. And I think that makes all the difference in this.
All right. Well, we are at approaching a very important moment in this case, as we talked about expecting a ruling on the injunction next week. Adam, as John was heaping praise upon him earlier, I will add a little bit more on that. Adam has done the best coverage of this case of anyone who covers the Vols, and I don't just say that because of he's a coworker. I say that because it is true, and you can find that coverage over on knoxnews.com, and you can find the coverage that he will have from the injunction, whether it goes one way or the other, next week. And we will be back with you, I'm sure, to discuss here on the Volunteer State. Thanks for listening.